In a world asking the question, what if the movies that got delayed came out on time and they were different? That's the case in my universe. I'm Steven Shinder and you're listening to Delayed Replay, Season 5, airing every other Saturday, unless I change my mind.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we recap or review movies that got delayed in that other universe but came out on time in our universe, or sometimes, like in this instance, talk about movies that came out here but not over there. And if you've listened to this podcast for the last little while, you know that occasionally we talk about the Men in Black movies that came out over here, and over here it's the 10th one for us that we're talking about now. Men in Black Intergalactic. But first, introductions are in order. I'm joined once again by Zach Arnold, who was with me the previous time for the Mufasa, the Lion King episode. How's it going, Zach?
Man, this is unprecedented territory for me. I don't think I've had this many guest appearances in any recent memory, and I also don't know if I've been on back-to-back episodes before. So this is history in the making, and I appreciate you inviting me back because it just felt so fitting that a guy who has done 10 years on a show called Intergalactic Peace should be discussing a Men in Black movie also called Intergalactic. You don't hear that word in a movie title that often, and so I was really, really excited when you brought up this opportunity because I love stuff that is set in the stars. I've really enjoyed the Men in Black franchise for what it is, and so I felt like this was a really good fit. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think this is like the first time having you on here back to back. So, you know, someday when they're like when podcast is a subject that they teach in like high school or whatever, this will be a chapter in one of those textbooks.
A footnote at best. I don't think my prowess on the internet is quite that high. I'm no Markiplier or Mr. Beast, that's for sure.
Well, hey, a footnote is better than a toe note, you know?
Yes, that is true.
Right. So just to start off, what's been your general like thoughts and feelings on the Men in Black franchise as a whole? I know some of these movies have like the memory erasing feature, so sometimes it's hard to remember certain things, but what's your overall vibe with this franchise?
You know, it's interesting you bring that up about the ability to have your mind wiped within the franchise, because I think there are probably a couple of duds in this franchise, if I'm being honest, where I wish I could have my mind wiped so I don't have to think about them. Frank the Pug being the first one right off the bat for me. But
yeah.
I actually have really enjoyed just the fact that there has been so much of it. It's a continuing presence. The continuing presence of the Men in Black franchise has been something that's been steady for, you know, summer blockbuster flicks. People want just a fun romp to go and watch for a couple of hours, and they get, you know, aliens, and they get action, and they get you know, some sort of political intrigue oftentimes. And so it's a well-made franchise, even if it's not everybody's cup of tea. I do think that it has come a long way since the 1995 movie, although I will give the hot take that may be one of the top 3 movies for me out of this franchise. Just because I'm a big David Schwimmer fan. And I loved him in Friends. I've loved him in, you know, the Madagascar franchise, other stuff that he's been a part of. And I thought it was a really interesting take. And so The Men in Black is actually probably a top 3 for me just because of David Schwimmer.
Yeah, I mean, he does great physical comedy in Friends, so you gotta give him props for that, you know, and he has so many like quotable lines, and like, I mean, Friends in general has lots of memorable quotes that are just like right in the lexicon of like pop culture and whatnot.
Yeah, and it was really funny how they came like dangerously close to him saying like we were on a break, and then he gets interrupted by like some sort of alert. I was like, oh, they almost said it. They almost said it.
Yeah.
But his best line in that movie, in my opinion, is when he does that god awful Richard Nixon impression. He tries to convince the security guard at the place they're breaking into that he's not the bad guy, and he tries to make a joke out of it by trying to say, "I am not the crook," and he just doesn't sound like Nixon at all. You know exactly what he's trying to do, but you also see him fail miserably. And I thought it was just a great setup and one of those great, like you said, physical comedy, one of those timing type of comedy moments in that film for Schwimmer. Like, that's probably his best line in the whole film.
Yeah, and funny enough, like behind the scenes, like they genuinely wanted him to do a good impression there, but he ended up botching it, and they're like, you know what, this is funnier. Let's just leave it in.
This is just as good. We'll just roll with it. Yeah, and that
Yeah.
I think that is Schwimmer's sweet spot. So I guess that's why I've got a soft spot for that film. Is Schwimmer and some of the jokes that exist in it. It's obviously not the quote unquote quality that you would get from Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith. Like, obviously their chemistry is fantastic, but to see Schwimmer playing opposite Clint Eastwood was definitely a choice, and I respected it.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, for me, the movies, you know, they're entertaining overall. Some are better than others, of course. As I've talked about on the show. Men in Black International, you know, the one that came out after MIB 23, you know, the Jump Street crossover, and Men in Black 4 as well.
Right.
So International, I thought was fine, but I think most people were like mixed at best on it, or just outright didn't like it. But yeah, but I think the star power of, you know, Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, like I don't think they got like their acting or the casting of them criticized, at least not from what I could tell, because people love them, just not the movie so much, you know.
And that's one of the weird things about that particular movie, International, is you have a really great cast, and like sometimes, like Ben and I over on IPC, we used to play this game where we would list off three big name actors, and then we would try to guess, you know, if this is like an actual movie or not, and then we would try to guess if it was above or below 7 stars out of 10 on IMDb. And you've got Hemsworth, Thompson, Kumail Nanjiani, Rebecca Ferguson. You've got Emma Thompson, Liam Neeson. Like these are big names in the acting world, and yet the movie is only 5.6 out of 10 stars. So it had to do something between the casting, the writing, and the execution that led to that type of response. Because if you just tell me it's a Men in Black movie with these actors, I would have been all over it. But yeah, it was probably one of those more mid ones out of the franchise for me. Probably, I mean, obviously, like top 5, top 6, I guess, just because I wasn't a big fan, like I said, of Frank or Declassified. So, like, out of the 10 is probably, you know, top 5, top 6, but that's still pretty mid as a whole, I would think.
Yeah, I quite liked Declassified, but there are those criticisms of like, yeah, it kind of shows you things that didn't really need to get answered. So, you know, there are people on both sides of that coin.
Yeah, it's I can appreciate it for what it is, but it just wasn't my cup of tea. That's all.
Right. Yeah, so International, I think in some respects was kind of forgettable, and I don't know if that's because of the memory erasing feature, or if that was absent and it just is naturally forgettable. But either way, I think that benefited audiences in our universe, because they're like, you know, I don't remember if I went to the theater to see this, and so because of that, International did gangbusters, and they released Intergalactic like 2 years later or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, it has to do with it being one of those staples. It's been in the theaters every couple of years. If you're looking for a fun summer action romp, like a popcorn flick type of thing, Men in Black is almost always a guarantee for that. Even if it's, not exactly the thing you're looking for, the thing you're hoping for, you find one joke, one action piece, one line delivery, one something, one explosion that that gets you and makes you want to come back and see if they can do something like that again. And so, yeah, I mean, financially, it was great because they released it at a time when not a whole lot of other stuff was out, and people just didn't have much to see. It still did good for what it was, and it was good enough to warrant a sequel. So that's where we're at now.
Yeah, so for this one, the Men in Black organization, Agent O gives this announcement of how, like, so since we've gotten more funding, we are expanding, and now we have Men in Black Intergalactic, and so Agents H and M. Oh wow, H&M, that's like the clothing store, isn't it?
It is a clothing store.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they are assigned to Men in Black Intergalactic, and so they now have like their own space station type thing and a space shuttle, and it's like, oh, with some franchises that go on a while, some people say that taking it into space could potentially jump the shark. But how do you feel about it happening here in a franchise that has dealt with aliens, even if primarily on Earth?
That's the thing, is if there was ever a franchise that warranted some sort of space incorporation, it was definitely the Men in Black franchise. If we're talking about like the Independence Day franchise, I would have been like, probably not. Let's keep it on planet Earth, please. But Men in Black, it makes sense. And what's really interesting is you've got, entire TV series or certain movies that are set on space stations. And so you take a look at the design of something like Babylon 5 or even Deep Space Nine, stuff that was around in the 90s, around the same time that the Men in Black franchise started. You're almost noticing similarities in the design features of this space station as a type of homage to other 90s space stations, and I thought that was really cool. It's not something that is completely mimicking one of those stations, but you can see like docking rings on this station that you're like, okay, that is reminiscent of Deep Space Nine. You see the some of the common areas once you get inside that remind you of something like Firefly or Babylon 5, and I'm like, okay, I appreciate what they're trying to do here. And it had a little bit of a modern take on it, but I really appreciated the design elements. They felt intentional and respectful.
Yeah, I quite liked the common area. Like they have their, little bar type thing. And because this is an intergalactic station, they have like alien ambassadors and whatnot. So you see them like drinking along with the humans here and getting into like some fun bar shenanigans. What did you think of this whole scene in the bar?
It's so funny that a bar is like the one thing that can bring any number of species together. And you see it plenty of times on Deep Space Nine. We're going to talk about Deep Space Nine a lot, apparently, because I'm a DS9 apologist. But Quark's bar in DS9 is supposed to be reminiscent of Cheers. There's even a character who's got his name like kind of in an amalgam, to be respectful of like a staple character from the show Cheers. And so like Cheers inspired DS9, and now DS9 seems to be inspiring Intergalactic. Like, greatness begets greatness. And to see some of those elements in the bar scene was something that really tugged at my heartstrings a little bit. The aliens look different. The interactions are different. You're in a different universe. You're in a different franchise. And yet some of it still felt very much the same. And so it was fun to see. I'm glad that they did it kind of off the bat, because I do feel like if they had done like a jokey bar scene type of thing in like the middle act or the third act, it probably would not have gone over as well. But because you're doing it while you're setting the stage for the station as a whole before the big situation comes up, I felt like it was properly timed and properly placed doing it in the first act. If they had done it later, I might have had different thoughts on it.
Yeah, I can totally see that, because there's some movies where they do it much later and it sort of throws things off. It's like, okay, this is clearly just here, like just to force some bonding between the characters, whereas here we don't really have that problem. I also really like the gardens that they show in this station and the tram thing that they travel on, again, like Babylon 5 vibes, like you mentioned. I will say there are some parts of the station where it looks really good, but there are like minor instances here and there where it's like, okay, they're clearly standing against a green screen. And for those instances, it's like you have to like hope that the story itself will make you forgive those particular moments.
Well, those are one of those things where you just have to chalk it up to it being a popcorn flick. You have to be able to suspend your disbelief in a few areas, because honestly, like creating practical sets for every single element is really expensive and really tough to do. And so sometimes you do have to have cutaways like that, or sometimes you've got like those really ridiculous looking aliens that are just enormous in proportion to everything else. And it's just easier to have a completely CGI set because you've got this giant octopus thing waddling around in the background going from, the bathroom to his office or whatever. And to try to have that as a practical effect on a practical set, that just wouldn't have worked in my opinion. And so, yeah, there are some instances where they have to throw in some CGI, but when they do it, they try to, I felt like they still tried to immerse you a little bit by giving you some like bigger alien life in the background to make it feel like they weren't looking at it quite as much.
Yeah, I definitely
I feel like they tried. Like I noticed it too. But when you do have to do green screens, try to do something that justifies it. And I felt like that octopus squid like creature kind of did that for me. I was like, oh, okay, that's why they're on the green screen, because they gotta animate that guy back there.
Yeah, for sure. They're assigned on this mission to because they intercept a transmission where like some aliens from this other marshland planet and some other galaxy are thinking about possibly invading Earth. And so agents H and M are told, okay, so you need to go see what's going on and see if you can prevent this so that we can maintain intergalactic peace in this coalition.
Oh my gosh, dude. That line is going to be the thing that vaults this into like, probably my favorite Men in Black movie, if not one of my top 5, top 10 favorite movies. Like, it's almost like somebody on the writing staff listens to my podcast or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I tried to like go through who all the writers and executive producers and stuff were, and I was like, there's got to be somebody. But I didn't recognize any of the names. Nobody that's in our chat section on a regular basis. And so I was like, I don't know. But yes, to have something that was that overt, it's just one of those grand coincidences. There's tens of thousands of hours of cinema out there, and this is the only instance I've ever heard of where that line actually gets used. And so,
yeah,
yes, it made me incredibly happy. And for a while, I kind of forgot what the plot was because I was just still replaying that particular scene in my head for like the next 5-10 minutes. I was like, he said intergalactic, and then he said peace, and then he said coalition. Like,
yeah.
I lost it. I lost it for a little bit there. But no, to your point, it's interesting to see that the Men in Black have a coalition. It's interesting to see that it's not just Earth that they're taking care of anymore. It's almost becoming like Starfleet, like the United Federation of Planets. You have other worlds and other species that you're now interacting with and cooperating with. And so to even have a coalition is a really cool concept to me. And whether it's marshlands or mountain regions or whatever, I like that they kind of give you a heads up on where they're headed instead of just surprising you with it. Because Star Wars is particularly guilty of this. I would say, especially in a place like Empire Strikes Back. You start out on like an icy planet and you weren't anticipating that. And then when Luke heads to Dagobah, it's quite a contrast that you're now like in this swamp world. And, they never give you any idea or impression of what it is very much. I mean, does the opening scroll say the ice world of Hoth in episode 5, or does it just say the planet Hoth?
I'd have to look at it again. You would think I would know by heart because I've seen that film so many times and it's my favorite Star Wars film, but evidently I just don't remember it.
Right? So I think maybe the opening crawl talks about it, but other than that, you don't really get a whole lot of heads up, more or less, about what type of world you're going to. And so when they say like that marshland, I found it on the remote ice world of Hoth. So the opening crawl will kind of give you the heads up about the ice world, but then you have like total surprise when it comes to Dagobah. But my point being, when it gets mentioned like that, you go from a very pristine and white with technology, glistening brand new space station type of place, to such an utter contrast as a marsh world. When they bring that up, you're already kind of mentally preparing yourself for that contrast. How you're going to go from something that's really nice, really bright, really pristine to something that could be really dirty and really mucky. So it's one of those little tidbits that I notice in the writing that I appreciate, but maybe some people might think that you're like hand feeding plot exposition to them. So I see both sides of it, but I liked it.
No, yeah, and I do appreciate how the marshland planet does look pretty disgusting. Like it feels like you could almost smell it, really, and it's like, I don't want to be in this place. And what's even funnier is like before going to this place, there's that whole debate amongst the Men in Black members and officials and whatnot, where there's that whole talk about like, okay, so we're considering switching up to these space uniforms, like to go more with the aesthetic of where we are now. And so they do this presentation of these like one piece outfits that it basically, it's like the cliche of basically kind of a janitor outfit looking thing that has maybe one or two colors, and it's supposed to be like, oh, they wear this because they're in space now. And then like the agents are arguing like, man, can't we just keep our regular uniforms? We're the Men in Black, remember? And so they keep their normal uniforms on this swamp world mission, but that bites them in the back because it gets their outfits dirty.
The Men in Black, they wear suits most of the time, right?
Yeah.
So like, I don't understand why they would fight the idea of wearing space suits. Like, that feels like a natural transition to me. And yet they go on like this whole 90-second spiel about uniform options and stuff. And I'm like, this should not even be a question. Like, unless you want to like hand stitch a tie to the front of your jumpsuit or something, like how are you supposed to like maintain the integrity of your suit in these different environments, these different planets that you're going to? I think of, what is it, Buzz Lightyear, even from the first Toy Story movie, where he's awakened from quote unquote hypersleep. He's on Andy's bed, whatever. But he's jumping up and down on the bed and he's like, terrain seems a bit unstable. No readout yet if the air is breathable. Like, he's doing an analysis of the world that he's on. And if he doesn't have the proper suit and the proper equipment for that, and he doesn't know if the air is breathable or not, then if he's wearing, more civilian secret agent type clothes like a suit and tie, there's no guarantee that as soon as you step out of that planet that you're going to be hit with acid rain or you're going to be hit with some sort of noxious gases. Like, the whole argument felt so illogical to me.
Yeah, it feels kind of like Kingsman, in those movies, their whole shtick is like, oh, you got to be like a gentleman and dress like one, basically be like James Bond type deal. So they would dress formally and go on these missions. But it's like, the more you think about it, the less practical that seems.
Oh, really. It's super impractical. Yes, it's super impractical. And they're on planet Earth. You understand what Earth's atmosphere and terrain is going to be like. And in most of those situations, it would probably be appropriate. But you're in space. There's different rules in space. Even if it's a space station with artificial gravity, there's different rules. And I guess it kind of annoyed me that they spent so much time arguing about what to wear. I guess that's how they prepared the audience, being like, the audience is always going to have these debates online. There's always going to be a Twitter thread. There's always going to be a Reddit forum. There's always going to be something that, ends up dissecting every part of a film. And so I guess I can see that having them dissect it, lets you know that the writing staff maybe had trouble with switching to spacesuits or something. I don't know, but it felt like a kind of inordinate amount of time to be having this conversation. But that's just me.
Yeah, it felt like they were saying, oh, because we acknowledge this inconsistency, it makes our movie flawless. See, we acknowledged it and the characters are doing this, but it's like, that's not how movies work.
Right.
And so for this mission, they're also accompanied by a few alien companions because, they're told, well, not all aliens really love humans all that much. And Chris Hemsworth is like, wait, why? But then he's like reminded of Earth's history and he's like, oh, fair point.
Right.
So they get Pawnee, the little alien warrior, and Luca, the alien mobster, both of which appeared in International. So I guess these are kind of the alien mascots of this particular set of films. And they also got Donald Glover. International hinted at him being an alien celebrity. But the surprise here was there's actually two of him, two Donald Glover aliens, one who masquerades as Donald Glover and the one who masquerades as Childish Gambino. So the fact that they fed into that meme, it was like, wow, they actually did it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of connectivity to pop culture and meme culture in this film. And that's just one example. There was the Childish Gambino bit. There was a dance routine because apparently 90s dance moves are coming back to the theaters. There was a mention of what was it, the Big Bang Theory. I think somebody was being really nerdy and giving a lot of technical specs, and somebody looked over and goes, "Okay, Sheldon." There were some of these different pieces of somewhat relevant meme culture that got incorporated into this film, and I feel like some of them may have hit for some and some of them may have hit for others. And I think that's what this type of franchise is good at, is you do kind of a shotgun method of pop culture jokes and references and just see if one of them hits your target demographic. Because even if one of them hits, it's enough for them to mention it, talk about it, enjoy it, and possibly come back to the next film. So I liked the Childish Gambino. I liked the Big Bang Theory reference. Didn't care as much for the dance routines. So it just depends on what your taste is.
Yeah, I liked the scene where, the two Donald Glovers, are like rapping to each other about this mission. But the scene later on where, the team does a dance routine for the marshland aliens as a show of goodwill, where they dance to I Wanted That Way by the Backstreet Boys. I feel like that sequence went on for way too long, and like these marshland aliens seemed really perplexed by this and sort of took it as an act of aggression.
Dude, I didn't even need to be a marshland alien to be perplexed by it. I was looking at this going, why is this the song you're choosing? Like, why are you telling these marshland aliens that you've never met before that they are your one desire? Like, how do you feel like anybody would respond to that? Like, you are my fire, you're my desire. Like, excuse me, stranger danger much? Like, it just the whole thing made very little sense to me. But there are so many times where that happens, and I sometimes have to like ask my wife, what just happened there? Like, she's more into the pop culture trends than I am, and so I have to ask her sometimes, like, was that a reference that I didn't get? And she would just kind of lean over and be like, I'll tell you later. And it's still, some of it doesn't make sense to me. But
Yeah, and what would you say is the best way to describe how these aliens look? Because they do feel familiar, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it.
It's kind of funny. It's so easy to create humanoid aliens. Have them bipedal with a couple of weird dangly arms. Star Trek excels at that. They just kind of change their cranial ridges or give them tusks or something like that. I appreciate that Intergalactic decided to give us a completely different looking alien, and their face and like even their hair arrangement looked like the mane of a lion almost. But they had not fur, but it almost looked like fur. It almost kind of felt like a furry fever dream, just a little bit. Like like they're a cross between bipedal but then also walking on all fours. So like they can run. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Madagascar almost. You remember how Alex the lion could like run on all fours, but he also liked to stand up on his haunches?
Yeah, he would stand around doing like dance routines and
Yes,
stuff.
he would stand up for dances and waving to the crowd and stuff, but then when they make it to Madagascar, he's able to run on all fours and chases after his friends and chases after the Fusa and people like that. So like he's got this cross between being able to stand up on his haunches and run on all fours. And so that's kind of what it reminded me of, almost like anthropomorphized lions, but they also had kind of those longer incisors that kind of stuck out of the corners of their mouths and made them almost look like saber tooths almost when they snarled. So like very, very short, coarse fur, mane of a lion, and like the mouth of a saber tooth, but they could stand up on twos or all fours. It was confusing and bold, but I think that's what I liked about it. It was different. It wasn't just putting humans in costumes. You had to do like mocap suits in order to get that kind of depth.
Yeah, and what's really funny about this is that they do the dance routine, and so now they become fugitives of these lion saber-toothed alien people. But because the routine was being broadcast, or they're trying to broadcast it around the world, so now they're
It's a
fugitives.
publicity move.
Yeah,
It's a publicity stunt. I don't think they were really actually going to try to thwart the threat that was impending. I think it was a PR move gone wrong.
yeah, but something else that went wrong is the transmission also got sent to another alien planet. And so this other alien planet thinks that these marshland people want to attack them. Like they see the message as a form of aggression as well. And these aliens, they come from this. It's a planet that's like made of marshmallows, but the alien people themselves look like they're made of wood, but in the shapes of tripods. It kind of felt like they were doing like a throwback type thing, but with some questionable CGI here.
Yeah, that one was probably a little too bold. Like you could tell that the Sabretooth people were at least people in mocap suits, and they were just kind of transitioning between, walking on 2 feet versus running on all fours. But to have a species that looks like a wooden tripod, I just, that one didn't go as well for me. But one of the things that Men in Black does is they try to show us a diversity of species. We had those squid characters. We've got like little talking creatures that look like maybe household pets, and then you've got saber-tooths, and then you've got tripods. But the weird part is like the top of these triangular pedal, what do you call them, tripedal instead of bipedal, I guess, if they're
Yeah,
three
I guess
legs.
so.
if they're not bipeds, then they're tripeds. That's
Yeah.
that's recipe for disaster. But the interesting thing is I got very strong Pirates of the Caribbean vibes from these guys, because in the second and third films, Davy Jones's crew is all very either wood or nautical themed creatures. And for some reason, I kept getting the impression that these guys were like those tree characters from Dead Man's Chest. And so I kind of saw where they were trying to go with it, but I think they wasted all their budget on other stuff, and the CGI on these creatures just didn't work as well as some of the others.
Yeah, they needed to allocate the budget a bit better, to keep things balanced, and ultimately they kind of didn't. And so because of all the miscommunication, there's a fight between these two worlds. The Sabretooth people like use their bazookas, and it creates scorches on this marshmallow planet, so it's like they're making s'mores. Basically, the agents make a quip about that, which how could they not, I guess.
Of course.
But yeah, they're trying to figure out how to undo their unintentional consequences of their dance routine. And so they try to come up with a plan. So what'd you think of this scene where like the team is like trying to come up with a plan, but they're arguing, and how that all went down?
It gave me like Guardians of the Galaxy vibes, if I'm being honest.
Oh, yeah, I actually rewatched that recently for its 10th anniversary.
Like that little council where they're all standing up, and Peter Quill's like, we need to give a shit. And excuse me if I'm not allowed to cuss.
I could just bleep that out.
but he's like, we really need to care, and everybody else is like, all right, Quill, I'll stand with you. Like, they start by all arguing, and everybody has different ideas on how to solve it. And one of them is saying that they need another dance to undo the dance that they just danced, and they're like, no. And then somebody else is like, well, a bazooka fixes everything. And I'm like, no, that is the opposite of what you need to be doing right now. And so like they have like this really intense back and forth amongst all of them, trying to figure out what the solution is. And I think what's really funny is they had all of these different punchlines. They had all of these different ideas, and their best idea was to just call Agent O and see what she says.
Yeah.
Like, none of you could put two brain cells together to figure out what to do next to fix this situation, so you're just going to call home and ask for advice? Like, I get it. Like, you need to admit when you're in over your head, but you do this whole spiel, you do this whole conversation, this whole argument, whatever you want to call it, and your best solution is to ask for advice.
Yeah. And so Agent O calls in a conference with like the other people who are on the station, and they all try to pitch ideas of what to do. And this felt very much like a studio pitch meeting. You had the moment where one of them is like, what if we just what was it? What if we just give them balls of yarn to play with, and everyone else looks at that person like they're stupid and just throws them through glass, like doing that meme basically.
Yes. Oh, dude, I didn't even think about that. Where like there's some like really dumb ideas, and then there's like that one that's like somewhat logical. Everybody gives them the angry face and then throws them out the window. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're right. I hadn't even thought about that. Whoa.
Yeah. But yeah, the pitches are not very good. So Agent O decides in a surprise move to call Agent K, Tommy Lee Jones, because like, they've had a thing together and he's been in retirement and stuff, and she knows she's in contact with him, and so she calls him to ask like what if he has any ideas of how to solve this. And so he's like, why don't you just get the people to talk to each other? And so evidently that is the solution, but the way to get there but the way to get there is like, what's the best way to approach this? And so they go back down the line. It's this funny thing of like, he calls someone, they call someone, they call someone, and once they get the answer, they hang up, call the other person, hang up, call the other person. It was just a whole thing here.
Well, what's so dumb is this is supposed to be like futuristic spy material, right? Like you're supposed to be super high tech, and we're basically just playing a giant game of telephone for a whole scene. Like I'm gonna hang up and call you right back, or I'm gonna talk to this guy, and like no conference calls, no video calls, no being able to like merge conversations so that everybody's on the same page. Like none of that. It's almost like 70s telephones, just more modernized. It was funny. It made for good comedy. But logically, like, how does an advanced space station not know how to merge conversations?
Yeah. So once they get this idea to get the two worlds to talk to each other, Agent M is like, you know what gets people in a good mood to talk to each other? Good food. And then Agent H is like, yes, and I know exactly the type of food that people love. Shawarma.
Him being an Avenger, it just makes it so perfect. Because he was in that post-credits scene way back in the first Avengers movie where they all go eat shawarma together. And then for Hemsworth's character to be the one to suggest shawarma, I bust out laughing. I was like that Captain America meme. I was like, I understood that reference. I understood that. So to be able to create like a subtle homage to previous franchises is another thing that I really credit this writing staff for, because not a lot of places would be able to pull that off quite so well. And yet that was funny, but it was appropriate for the context of the situation of the movie too. So good on you.
Yeah, and the thing is that they want really authentic shawarma, so they fly all the way back to Earth and try to go to like the best shawarma places, but like it's like super expensive, so for some reason, so they end up having to like do a heist to get the best shawarma that there is from the best shawarma restaurant, and it's a whole chase and whatnot. Like it's a whole thing, and it's like, what is up with this movie, man? like
the world's worst dine and dash almost. Like you just, I don't even know. And that's the thing about these types of films, is they have that potential to go off of the rails sometimes, and when they do, it has to be for a good story reason, or it has to be for a good comedy reason. And I truly don't know if this whole shawarma sequence was worth it, because I feel like you could have just said shawarma and then like cut to the table and it's got shawarma on it. But no, you had to go on this whole side quest to try to find shawarma. And I was like, how is this going to be what brings intergalactic peace to this coalition? Like, how does any of this, like, just send a lackey to go pick up some food or hire your station chef to figure out how to make it. Like, why do you need a heist for shawarma in this situation? But I don't know. That part I didn't really agree with.
Yeah, it does feel like they're essentially beating a meme to death, like around a decade, like almost a decade, like after it was a thing. And it's like, why are you trying to bring it back? Like, it's not working quite as much.
Right.
But they do get the shawarma, and they head back to where these alien worlds are, and they do this transmission and show the shawarma. Well, what they do is they try to film their own commercial to like zoom in on the shawarma, make it look delicious and appealing in the transmission. So you have this whole sequence where they're trying to like direct each other and act out and be like, okay, this is how we're gonna do the shawarma commercial. And it's like, man, this movie is like, yeah, it points out the absurdity of food commercials we have in real life, but it's so silly and so ridiculous.
Well, and I don't know if this is really what they needed for this particular action movie either. Like, it's supposed to be an action flick, a spy flick, a alien drama type of thing that's supposed to come to some sort of a big fight scene at the end or some sort of, critical resolution, or at the very least leave you on a cliffhanger. I don't know if this movie did any of that. Like, the way that they turned and kind of shifted gears in this third act made it feel like maybe they had a good idea off the bat, and then they didn't know how to land the plane, because you go from a shawarma heist to a commercial basically, and you're not really leading up for any kind of big climax of any kind. And the one that we did get just felt like a little disappointing. It felt a little flat for me. Like, we did get like a 5 to 10 minute action sequence right before the end, but none of it really landed for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, it really felt like, it was not very exciting toward the end, and so you kind of get surprised when the movie does come to an end. But yeah, they get these aliens to talk to each other over this shawarma lunch thing. You have this conversation between them where they're like, well, our planet is a marshland, well, ours is a marshmallow, and they have this argument about which of them is allowed to consider themselves a Martian. And you have Agent M saying, oh, we better not tell them about the Martians on Mars, that'll throw another wrench in the whole thing. But they eat the shawarma, and the team clears up like what happened, and that on Earth the Backstreet Boys song is not necessarily considered an act of aggression. It's just a fun thing that some people dance to, and which is kind of alien for these aliens to think about, but they try to wrap their heads around it, and ultimately they understand, and they come to some sort of peaceful agreement, and of the invasion of Earth itself also gets prevented. So yeah.
Yeah, and here's one more take that I'm going to have. We've been mentioning a lot of different sci-fi shows lately. I think this particular plot, where they reach a resolution that avoids peril to planet Earth, is one of those types of plots that you might see in an episode of Star Trek.
Yeah.
The resolution, the conversation, the peace bringing, the avoidance of war, it feels very much like The Next Generation or something, like Captain Picard being able to talk down a couple of rival worlds on board the Enterprise. It feels like the Men in Black are having this type of a sit down between two potential warring factions, avoids the conflict and simultaneously avoids conflict with Earth. Like, yes, that's all nice, that's all well and good, but that feels more like a television plot than a movie plot to me.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of how there are maybe a couple different Star Trek movies where some would say it feels like an episode just extended and not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily feature film worthy.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely get that vibe here. You know, that there are action bits here and there, but Men in Black trying to be Star Trek. I like the sentiment of, you know, try to resolve things peacefully, but it felt kind of off for the Men in Black DNA to like do it in this sort of manner and just a ping-ponging back and forth. It kind of felt like a bit much to me.
Well, okay. Here's the thing. It's also a really big contrast from International, which had some pretty big fight scenes in it, including the big reveal about, one of their own being a spy, being a mole.
Yeah.
Like, you go from a big action flick like that to something that's a lot more tame and mellow. You're basically, to continue the Star Trek comparisons, if I may, you're basically going from First Contact, which is full of action and intrigue.
Yeah, I knew you were gonna go for that comparison. Yeah, I
You're
agree.
going from First Contact to Insurrection, basically. This is essentially the Insurrection of the Men in Black franchise.
Yeah. Do you think that maybe they were overcorrecting because of the mixed reception for International?
It could be, but I think they overcorrected in the wrong direction. I think if you're going to correct things, you need to have better action sequences, not a lack of action sequences. You went from big CGI fights and explosions to Backstreet Boys dance routines. Like, this is the wrong direction, fellas.
Yeah. Well, at least they didn't do One Direction, you know?
Oh
Like
boy. Oh boy. Good. That was good. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, but yeah, pretty anticlimactic. There is like a bit at the end where, you know, they're like flying back to the station and like looking back at the stars and sort of being mesmerized about how magnificent like the whole universe is, and then you see the Donald Glovers chuckling and they're like, you think that this is the only Marvel universe? And then it zooms out and reminds us that, oh yeah, the universe is just one of multiple marbles that are each a different universe. So I guess this is their way of teasing the next movie, Men in Black Interdimensional.
Yeah, it's inevitable. And I'm hoping that if you're jumping between dimensions, that what you're going to be doing is seeing various versions of yourself that look and act and behave differently. So, like the way that H and M, converse and interact in this version may not be the way that they look and interact in another version. And I think that would be interesting to explore, but I also don't know how much hope I'm going to have for it, because the first 2/3 of this film started strong and then it just kind of like coasted on fumes to the finish line. I think I'm going to need Interdimensional, if that's truly the way that they go. I think I'm going to need it to have a stronger third act than what this one had. It's still a fun movie for what it is, and I still love it because they actually said the words intergalactic and peace and coalition. Like, that's never going to change how I feel about it. But I guess this movie helped me realize how much I appreciate a strong third act that ties everything together. And I don't know if this film did it quite as well as some others I've watched.
Yeah. And again, it's Sony jumping on the multiverse trend again, it seems, which, I mean, with Spider-Verse being as successful as it is, like, I guess, of course it would be on their plate, but with so much of this happening with a couple different franchises. It really feels like just a vehicle rather than a destination worth trying every single time.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And that's the danger of a popcorn flick franchise is some of them are hits and some of them miss the mark a little bit. But when you make 10 of them, it's because people are going and watching it. And I think it would stand to reason that if this one, made more than they spent on it by a pretty good margin, that they're definitely gonna continue this trend and keep making them.
Yeah. So interdimensional might be something for next season to talk about then, but for now, what are your final thoughts on Men in Black Intergalactic? Anything else you might want to bring up for it? And score out of 10, and measurement for that score.
Ooh, I gotta think of what kind of measurement I'm gonna use. I really appreciated the motion capture of the saber-tooth creatures. I thought that was probably one of the best parts of the whole film. But I do think that third act wasn't one of the best that I've ever seen. So I liked the direction they're going. I hope that they keep that space station. I hope that they, have more stories that come of it, because I think it's a great jumping off point into other adventures. I think it's a logical next step for the Men in Black franchise to leave Earth and engage in, conversations and be a part of the greater galaxy. So I think the station and some of the motion capture were some of the brightest spots of this film. And it's definitely something to build off of. But I think I'm probably gonna have to give it 6 shawarmas out of 10. Like it's fun, it's got bright spots, but it's got some things to work on as well.
Yeah, I was also thinking that number, 6 s'mores out of 10, I guess I'll say.
That marshmallow world did a number on you, didn't it?
Yeah, it truly gave me a sweet tooth right after. I had to go get hot chocolate and something sweet and whatnot. But yeah, it's if it's on, I might just have it on in the background, and if I want something to turn my brain off too. But it's not the most exciting thing. I do like some of the character interactions and a bit of the world building, but some of the opportunities felt somewhat squandered. So it would be nice for the next film to do things better, although my expectations aren't necessarily high at the moment with how this one went and how movie franchises in general kind of are now. So yeah,
it's true.
Oh, I thought you were gonna add something to that.
No,
Okay.
no, sorry. I have no disagreements with that. Like it's very rare to find sci-fi type films that are going to be in that 9 to 10 out of 10 range, because you have so many different opinions and so many different areas that you're trying to hit, so many niches and itches you're trying to scratch, that you risk not hitting the mark in order to hit multiple marks. And I think that's what this film did.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I guess that'll do it for this one. Thanks for joining me again, Zach. Where can people find all your stuff?
Same place as it was last time. I'm Zach the Voice on pretty much every social media platform you can find, everything from Facebook to Threads. So you can find different updates on different appearances that I'm making, or different YouTube programs I'm a part of, like Legacy of Westeros and IPC. And I'm going to be doing some local sports broadcasting. That's kind of my primary thing that I do in the springs and the falls. So high school football is right around the corner, and we'll be doing a lot of that in the next coming weeks, going up till December or so. So I'm glad that I'm getting these guest appearances in now before things get really busy. But thanks again for having me, and I'm looking forward to whenever I can come back. But until then, it's just at Zach the Voice.
Nice. Yeah, and I'll put those links in the show notes as usual. And always great to have you on. And yeah, so this podcast will be back in 2 weeks with a different topic. And without further delay, have a good day.
All right, and a happy birthday to Chris Hemsworth this weekend. Yeah, so you get this episode for that occasion, I guess. And yeah, really fun episode. Some stuff I'd forgotten about the 1995 The Men in Black, like how that Friends line was a reference to that movie. Wild. But yeah, you can follow me at Steven Shinder on Instagram, Twitter, /X, Threads, Steven Shinder Storytelling on Facebook, stevenshinder.com for my novels, and you can follow me on Letterboxd, Goodreads, and yeah, the other Steven will be here in a moment to talk about the D23 announcements and a couple shows he's watched recently, like the final season of Umbrella Academy and Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but no spoilers. And yeah, so you could also email this podcast via delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. So your thoughts on shawarma. You can also check out Yesshift, a podcast/vlog that I do with my dad, where we talk about the band Yes, and we've interviewed people associated with them. So cool stuff in the near past and also coming up. Couple cool interviews in the near future, so go ahead and follow that if that's your thing. And also keep an eye out for Cinemabies, my friend Jesse's new podcast. I'll gonna be on an episode that'll be out in the near future. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say which movie it is, but yeah, follow that page on Facebook and see what it ends up being. So yeah, without further delay, here's the other Steven. Hey everyone, so I'm trying to remember what exactly I covered, like, film-wise last time. I know I talked about Deadpool and Wolverine, and I even put out a video on my YouTube channel, Steven Shinder Reviews in video form, talking about the movie and about the Comic-Con announcements about Avengers Doomsday and my thoughts on that. So yeah, over on that YouTube channel you can find thoughts on movies and shows like The Acolyte. I even appeared on my friend Mr. Multiverse's Patreon talking about The Acolyte finale. I may have forgotten to plug that a little while back, but yeah, go ahead and check that out. But yeah, so now, Comic-Con was a couple weeks ago, but now we've gotten D23. I did not attend. I never attend those, but the announcements tend to trickle into my feed when they happen. And there are some trailers, but I feel like I can't be asked to seek out all of them, because honestly, trailers don't really do that much for me anymore. And the thought of trying to look for everything that was, all the trailers I were shown, it kind of makes me sick thinking about actually doing that. But yeah, so where to begin? So I guess on the Marvel side, apparently there was some Ironheart footage. That's a character that I kind of wish we had explored before she appeared in Wakanda Forever, but I'm glad that that's finally happening. And Daredevil Born Again, that's been in the works for a while, and curious to see how that will finally turn out. And there's been some animation related stuff. Well, there's gonna be a live action Lilo and Stitch, and they showed how Stitch is gonna look in this version. I guess it's kind of comparable to live action Sonic, although depending on who you ask, it's like the original trailer version or as good as the revised, more cartoony looking one. I feel like the shade of blue on this Stitch is kind of throwing me off. And I don't know that I really have enthusiasm about it since animated Lilo and Stitch franchise is where my bread and butter is. So, yeah, I'm not really excited about it. I know there is also a trailer for Mufasa, the Lion King. The story seems interesting, and I know the movie was talked about on Delayed Replay 2 weeks ago, but yeah, just to reiterate, animation would get me more excited if the story was being told in that medium. I'll probably catch it on Disney Plus eventually, but yeah, I'm not really keen on seeing it in the theater. Or Avatar, Ash, and Fire, really, because yeah, I was really surprised how the Way of Water didn't really thrill me as much as I thought it would. Like it felt to me like all the praise was to the effects, but the effects even didn't look as spectacular to me as other people were saying. So I'm not really all that excited to see the third movie. So it's possible I'm, and there's a whole can of worms to open with that franchise as well. But yeah, I'm just don't really have much to say about that upcoming sequel whenever it's coming out. I don't even know the year off the top of my head at the moment. And Tron Ares apparently is going to have Nine Inch Nails doing its music, which, Nine Inch Nails, what I've heard from them is very cool, Hurt, and the song that was in Twin Peaks The Return as well. And I may have listened to an album of theirs a while ago, but if the casting for Tron Ares is still the same, then I might not really be interested. So, yeah, I feel like I'm being kind of a downer with these, but I do think I'm on the other side of the whole thing, with Pixar. I feel like I'm a bit more positive on some of the stuff there than other people seem to be online. There was concept art shown for Toy Story 5. It looks like it'll deal with kids using devices, and it looks like Woody might be back in the picture. I loved the ending of Toy Story 4. I thought that film was better than I was expecting, and it was worth telling, telling the Woody and Buzz story, although I do admit Buzz did seem kind of stupid in that installment, and I'm kind of worried he might seem stupid again in the fifth one, but I think they could justify Woody being back without ruining the ending of 4. I don't think he and Bo are gonna have a nasty breakup or whatever. I'm sure I guess I'm kind of optimistic that there will be a justifiable reason. So I'll withhold judgment until I actually go and see it. The Incredibles 3 is officially happening, although I don't know if it'll have the time jump that everyone wants. I did really enjoy 2, I think more than the average person. I see these people online saying that they really didn't like 2, and yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna need to rewatch it and reevaluate, but I remember really enjoying 2. So I hope that 3 is still really good. And outside of Pixar, I know Frozen 3 was announced. I've never seen 2. I didn't really like 1 all that much. So, And I know people are like really bummed out about the sequel thing. I mean, back in the Elio episode of Delayed Replay, you know, all the talk about we need more original Pixar movies, and Elio is coming out in this universe next year in 2025, I believe. So that's an original that's still happening, and they also announced Hoppers, which involves a girl switching her mind with a beaver, and I think Daniel Chong is involved in it, if I'm not mistaken. It sounds like an odd premise, but again, this is an original idea, and people seem to be talking smack about the premise. But if you really want to show Pixar that you want more original films, then go and see these movies. You know, I didn't go see Inside Out 2, partially for this reason and because I didn't like the first one as much as other people have. I'll probably catch on Disney Plus eventually, but yeah, it's, you know, it is what it is. I guess there was a trailer for Moana 2. It could be good. I don't know why a live action one is happening. There's a live action Snow White that finally had its trailer, but again, you know, there's a controversy with the castings and how the dwarves look, and so there's not really much of note there in my opinion. Like, it, I don't know, like, it just doesn't look like it's gonna be that great. Funny enough, I have been reading a few Disney books that relate to. I have these Disney books that relate to Disney princesses. One of them is called Mirrorverse, and I guess it ties into a mobile game, and it involves Snow White joining forces with Sully from Monsters Inc. Mickey Mouse is in there somewhere, and Stitch as well. And it felt like really, like underdeveloped fanfic to me. And then I also read Mirror Mirror, which is also from Disney and is sort of a what if, part of their Twisted Tales series. And it's like, what if the prince had been poisoned or something? I thought it was kind of meh. Like, it took me a while to get through that one. And then there's part of the Disney Villains series, Fairest of Them All, which is more of a Evil Queen story, and it's been okay from what I've read, but yeah, I haven't been enjoying those books as much, but I am steadily getting back into reading the Fables comic series, which, you know, is connected to the Wolf Among Us video game. Maybe people listening are more familiar with that, and involves Snow White and other fairy tale characters. It's kind of like the show Once Upon a Time, but darker, and Once Upon a Time came later. I might finish that show in the near future. I only got to the first episode of season 5 and didn't like the direction it was going, and so I noped out of the show, but I might finish it. Like, season 4 of that show felt, when it got into the Frozen of it all, it really felt like they were just cross-marketing with current Disney stuff, and so it felt even more gimmicky and off-putting, but at some point I'll see if the ending is worth it. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out if there's any other Disney stuff I might be forgetting from D23. For Star Wars, I believe they showed footage of The Mandalorian and Grogu. I don't mind the title. You know, people love the Deadpool and Wolverine title, so it's like, why hate on The Mandalorian and Grogu? But I do wonder if there might be questionable decisions, like the way that the TV shows of that era have been structured. And you know, that film being the first theatrical Star Wars film since The Rise of Skywalker. You know, it feels a bit too safe of a return. And I really wonder if it will make bank, given that it's coming out around the same time as Avengers Doomsday, or either that one or Secret Wars. It's one of those two. It's gonna be within the same month, and it's like, did they not learn a thing from the Solo situation? You know, Solo came out pretty close to Infinity War and Deadpool 2. So, yeah, I don't know what the thought process is. But the trailer for the new show Skeleton Crew, you know, a Star Wars show that's supposed to be kind of like Amblin Entertainment stuff, like the Goonies. I definitely got Goonies vibes, but also feels similar to Star Trek Prodigy, and I've talked about how much I loved season 2 of that show, possibly my favorite season of Trek. But Skeleton Crew, I did kind of like the vibes of it. It comes out December 3rd, and yeah, I just hope that it's really good. It had this weird moment where when it showed Jude Law in the trailer, he takes off his hood as if he's a character we're supposed to recognize, but this is a character we've never seen before. And I think Mandalorian and Grogu, from what I've heard, will have a character who's been seen before in other shows, but it's like, why is he in this movie as opposed to, I don't know. Zootopia 2 is another thing that's happening. I really enjoyed the first one. Hope the second one lives up. See, Agatha All Along, I think, comes out in the near future. So that's a show I might get more excited about when watching it, because it's been more than 3 years since WandaVision, so it's felt very hurry up and wait. But then again, so has Daredevil Born Again, so maybe I need to, you know, take a step back, and whenever the show airs, then I'll air what I feel, I guess. I think there was a bit more shown from Captain America Brave New World, a bit more of Harrison Ford, I guess you could say. And let's see, something called, I think there's a sports related Pixar thing. It's called Win or Lose. Oh yeah, the show. So I'm curious how that's gonna be. Something called Monster Jam, some new Disney project. I'm not really sure what that is. I'm just scrolling through this article that I found. There's an Inside Out spinoff called Dream Productions. I don't know how I feel about that. Like I said, I wasn't as into the original Inside Out, so like, I don't know. There's Pixar's first. Oh, that's Win or Lose. Okay. Let's see. Am I forgetting anything as I scroll through this thing? Oh, there is talk about Andor season 2, and you know, that's a really good show. So hopefully, the second/final season does it justice. I saw that Arcane is gonna have its second and final season at some point. It's really weird calling season 2 the final season, but you know, it is what it is. I think Arcane is gonna have some spin-offs though. So yeah, that's it for D23, I think. Now, in terms of stuff I've been watching, I watched the final season of Umbrella Academy over on Netflix, and I thought they stuck the landing. I was satisfied with how they wrapped up stuff for the characters. No idea if this is how it happens in the comics. I haven't read the comics, but yeah, I thought it was good, and I'm glad that it was able to have a conclusion. 4 seasons, and I think that's longer of a run than is sometimes expected for these types of comic book shows that are different from others. And I also watched Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is the first TMNT animated series to be in the same universe as one of the films. This is a sequel to Mutant Mayhem, which came out last year. And, I talked about that film last year and how I wasn't that into it. The turtles felt very annoying, and I didn't like some of the gross out humor. But that felt dialed back in this show to me. It's 2D, but it looks better than Rise of the Ninja Turtles, and it doesn't feel as immature as Rise of the Ninja Turtles. Like, yes, it does skew toward a young audience, but I feel like it's better than that show. The Rise of the Ninja Turtles movie was surprisingly pretty decent compared to the show. But yeah, Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I thought it was enjoyable. Not as good as 2003 or 2012, but it was a little bit annoying that for Master Splinter they had him speaking Vermin, because finding ways so that he doesn't speak in his actual voice. I feel like it's because they couldn't afford to get Jackie Chan for this show, so it was kind of distracting, and I guess they didn't feel like hiring someone who sounded like him. So yeah, I don't know, it is what it is. But I thought this was a bridge series worth watching. It kind of has 2 major arcs, 6 episodes each, and it does not get into the high school of it all. I feel like that's something that they're saving for the sequel film, but it deals with mutant characters, and I quite liked how it was overall, so it was a nice surprise. Yeah, sorry, you might hear like some background noise right there. Oh, and all the episodes of Batman Caped Crusader, or the first season at least, or whatever, came out in the time between this episode and the previous Delayed Replay episode. I thought that show was good. It feels somewhat similar to the vibe of Batman the Animated Series, so because it doesn't feel all that like too different, it doesn't stand out as much to me as something like, say, Batman the Brave and the Bold. But I thought it was good. It was worth watching. I liked how the characters were in this version, and it has a nice noir 1940s-ish vibe, I guess. And yeah, I thought it was good. And I've still been enjoying Suicide Squad Isekai. I think there's just one more episode left. And Kite Man, hell yeah. That's been funny. So yeah, pretty good stuff in comic book animation. Oh, I almost forgot. There was Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. So the first 3 SpongeBob movies I actually think are good to different extents, but this new Sandy Cheeks movie, it's the worst film I've seen of this year, so the less said about it the better. Like the mix between animation and live action doesn't work as well in this instance, and the humor just feels very unfocused. It's just, yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping that the next one, I think there's a Plankton movie or something coming out at some point. I hope that is substantially better, because wow, this one was a pile of garbage. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much everything I've been watching, like, new stuff anyway. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and Delayed Replay will be back in 2 weeks with a different topic. So without further delay, have a good day.